Welcome to Altea Talks, the brand new podcast series being brought to you by Altea, the unique provider of combined insurance and risk management solutions designed exclusively for the medical, allied health and care sectors. I'm going to be your host, Will Marshall, and I'll be joined in this series by some of the leading movers and shakers from across the sectors. My guests are going to include practitioners and professionals, regulators, clinical risk and governance specialists, and an array of legal experts who are going to help us get to the heart of the hottest topics affecting the UK's health and social care sectors today. So, if you're looking for frontline knowledge and expertise, if you want valued insights into these most dynamic, challenging and rewarding of sectors, then look no further because you're in the right place. Welcome again to Altea Talks. Hello and welcome to this latest episode of Altea Talks. In this episode, we're going to be looking at some of the risk management and legal issues that are affecting the care and nursing home sectors in the UK. In analysing this sector, I'm very pleased to be joined by Lisa Heathcote. Lisa is Head of Claims Management and Adjusting for the UK and Republic of Ireland at DWF Claims. Lisa is something of a legal liability claims expert. Her portfolio includes motorsport claims, where she's handled many high-risk, high-value and high-profile matters, employers' liability, public liability, and medical malpractice claims. In the latter, Lisa has worked extensively in the UK and the USA, and she now leads a team of dedicated legal claims professionals based in the UK and Ireland, working across a wide array of medical malpractice claims. Lisa's team have particular expertise in managing legal issues and claims for a very extensive book of care and nursing home clients. Lisa's volume of care home claims has grown significantly in recent years, including medical malpractice claims, disciplinary and regulatory complaints, safeguarding issues, medication management, and public and employer liability claims. Lisa, a very warm welcome to Altea Talks.
Hi.
So, Lisa, what are the main trends that you and your team are currently seeing in the legal claims and cases that you're handling for care homes and nursing homes and their insurers?
Well, the largest number of claims that we receive is for violent attacks, either against the service users, against another service user, or against the caring staff at the facility. And I know we're going to talk about that shortly. So the next largest number of claims we receive in is a bit of a surprise. It's for missed medication or incorrect medication being dispensed. Now, on review of those cases, it clearly shows that the dispensing policy either is insufficient or is not being adhered to. So that will then have a weakness in any defence going forward. And the other increase in number in claims that we've seen is due to data protection breaches, where the facility has had to submit records to either an agency such as social working or to solicitors who have asked for copies of service users' records. And we're seeing a particular number of breaches and requests for indemnity for costs under the data protection.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I appreciate these things are all sort of interlinked, really. But turning to the first issue that you've identified there about the sort of safe dispensing of medication and the issues that you're seeing around that, what do you think are the sort of the underlying causes or reasons that you're seeing a spike of claims in that field?
We have noticed a large number of the care facilities reducing the number of staff that they have actually dispensing medication. And instead of having 2 people dispensing, they've reduced it down to 1. So that person is A, checking that the medication is as it should be, and B, that they are dispensing it correctly. Now, there is no independent audit then of what medication was handed to the service user. So there could be an economic reason for that and the sheer cost of staff at the moment. We do know that care salaries have gone up, and therefore our care homes may be looking at ways of reducing that cost. Unfortunately, not having strict dispensing policies will just simply result in claims having to be paid and then ultimately the cost of insurance going up.
Yeah, because they're virtually impossible to defend without
an independent auditor reviewing what has been dispensed. It's very difficult. It's a one person against another person argument, and very difficult to defend that.
Yeah, interesting. And in terms of other types of malpractice claims, obviously you've touched on the medication dispensing of medication issue and the data security problems that you're seeing. But what other types of claims do you typically encounter in care homes and nursing homes?
Negligent care, unfortunately, is definitely one of the largest reasons for claims coming in. Residents that are not being turned regularly or falls when unsupervised. And again, the care plans are so vital in those cases, and ensuring that those care plans have been updated by the care staff on a regular basis is absolutely vital to any defence going forward. The care plans need to be detailed, and where one-to-one supervision is required, one-to-one supervision is actually provided. And I know it's extremely difficult and trying circumstances that all of our care homes are in at the moment, but the care plan effectively is the central home for decisions to be made about service users. And from our perspective, negligent care is now so on the rise. All claimant solicitors now know how to run a negligent claim, and therefore the only thing that care homes can do is try and protect themselves and have the ability to increase their defensibility. It's not necessarily about the care that they're being given, but it's how they record it that's the key issue.
Yeah, as is often the way in all sorts of healthcare litigation. We very much saw care homes and nursing homes at the centre of public consciousness, really, at the time of the pandemic and the tragic events that unfolded back in March 2020 and subsequently. What are the continuing impacts of the pandemic on the sector that you and your team are witnessing?
The largest area for us is the retention of care staff. It's incredibly difficult to keep care workers. It's a very tough sector, and there is a reliance upon agency workers to be able to assist when care workers cannot be found. Now, we have several cases ongoing at the moment where new staff training has not been done to the standard previously, or indeed that the care workers that are being hired in through the agencies, English is their second language, and the requirements of the ability to be able to read and add to a care plan are not being strictly adhered to. And unfortunately, there are a large rise in numbers where the carers are not able to fully incorporate into, say for argument's sake, a fluid intake record. They're not able to write down exactly what was given and when, and therefore that record is deficient. And later on, when a neglect claim comes in, we then don't have the evidence to be able to defend it. So from our perspective, care staff is the number one issue that's still ongoing from the pandemic.
And of course, during the pandemic, there was a great deal of publicity about the exposure of those members of staff to the virus and the shortcomings in the PPE equipment that was being made available. To what extent are you seeing similar problems, or has that issue largely now been addressed?
From our perspective, it's been addressed. We're not finding PPE provision to be as such a problem as it was in 2020 and 2021. It seems to be accessible by all employees, and the quality seems to be back to the standard as it was prior to COVID.
That's good news. Just staying with COVID, are you seeing any COVID-related cases at the moment in the care home sector, or are they still working their way through the system, do you think?
No, in fact, that was one of the surprises that we had on the cases that we have. Very few claimant solicitors were actually progressing COVID claims against care homes. I think there's a social aspect to it. I think it was going to be very difficult to get in front of a court and to have a court criticise those people who were doing the absolute best that they could at the time. But also there was a causation issue to evidence and prove that an individual caught COVID as a result of negligence was going to be incredibly difficult. And I think that the claimant solicitors' cash flow might have been an issue when running cases such as that all the way through. So the cases we've had withdrawals on all of them actually to date. And so we've got no open ones currently.
That's interesting. And I guess we're going to hear a lot more about certainly the COVID story and the way that it impacted upon care homes and their residents when the COVID inquiry published its findings later in the summer. And I'm aware that there is an ongoing group action at the moment that I understand focuses on the decision that was taken in March 2020 to discharge patients who were asymptomatic back into the care home community.
Without the ability to be able to segregate them from the rest of the care home residents, or indeed the staff.
Yeah.
You have to understand that the staff in the care homes were not given the same level of PPE as the nursing staff in hospitals. And so, I'm also aware and looking on at the outcome of that, because I think it's a political decision was made on a care facility as to who they could and could not have in their premises. And, unfortunately, the brilliant care workers were at the brunt of it all.
Yeah. Moving on, we sort of touched very briefly on the issues of violence and abuse and neglect and the safeguarding concerns that unfortunately are sometimes a feature of the legal cases that we see in this sector. Are there any particular legal trends in claims and complaints of that nature involving care and nursing homes that you're seeing?
Yeah, the number of claims that we are now receiving where violence is an issue is significantly higher year on year. Now, when we drill down to the root cause, we're finding that carers are doing a brilliant job looking after and caring for service users, but they may not be recording all instances where a service user has been violent to either member of staff or to another service user. So that when an incident occurs, it looks as though that was the first time that individual had been violent, when the reality is that individual was known to have temper tantrums and strike out. The problem that we've then got is that the care plan and how the carers look after that individual would have been different had it been recorded the number of occasions that particular service user has been violent. So from our perspective, we have fed back to our insureds that the care plan should include a section on the history of violence and how the individual service user requires potentially additional care or additional handling. And then secondary to that, it's training of the carers on how to de-escalate or deal with violent attacks. And we highly recommend that all of our care homes utilise formal training to their staff on how to deal with such issues. It is an increasing issue, whether it be because of dementia or other issues such as that, or whether it is just a one-off attack. The physical violence that's being used in care homes is significant. There have been some really quite troublesome cases that have come across our desk. And so we are absolutely feeding back to our care homes that risk assessments and care plans needed to be updated once aggression or spontaneous acts are witnessed, and to keep on with the training of the staff on how to handle such issues.
Yeah. What other sorts of safeguarding issues are, in your experience, are causing concern for managers currently? For example, we've seen in the past, haven't we, cases alleging financial exploitation or isolation and so forth. Are you seeing any trends in those areas?
Yeah, well, rather surprisingly, one of the issues that upon preparing for this podcast, I looked at some of the cases that we had, and substance abuse is really on the increase. And so when you look at the details as to why, gifts from family members and then the service user taking said gift into their room, and the next thing you know, there's a whole bottle of whiskey having been drunk. That is definitely substance abuse appears to be something we'd never contemplated before with people in care homes. And that for sure is something that we have seen. In addition to that, we are still dealing with sexual abuse cases from either service users to other service users or from carers to service users. That is still an issue. It has, yes, got better since various cases have been highlighted by the media, but we are still finding that from a safeguarding point of view, abuse of service users is one of the key issues that's still around at the moment.
Yeah, well, it's sad, isn't it?
Mm.
Just moving on, you touched earlier on some of the issues around staff recruitment and retention and staffing challenges. Concerns about recruitment and retention are very familiar in the context of care and nursing homes. But what impacts are you seeing these issues having on the ground? And what strategies or initiatives are you seeing that have had any success in attracting and retaining qualified staff in such a notoriously difficult environment?
Well, for sure, the staffing issues on the ground is definitely having an impact on the profile of cases that we see. When there are limited numbers of staff, so the head ratio from service users to carers is not at the level that it should be, the neglect arguments are raised, as are various other arguments about tempers being flared because people are stressed, because there's so much work that needs to be done. And you can see that that's where some issues with service users and violence is escalated. Now, we have helped some of our care facilities with coming up with ways to ease the pressure on staff, and a lot of that is through risk management and ensuring that the policies that they need are done correctly, and we're quite happy to review policies just to check that everything's fine. But for actual staff retention, some of our insureds are using different shift patterns. So instead of having a full-on 8-hour shift or 12-hour shift, they're actually reducing it and doing 4 on, 4 off, 4 on, 4 off. That helps people who have children split up their day. Yes, it's a slightly longer day, but it fits in with a more flexible lifestyle. They are also competing against the NHS to get qualified nursing staff in. And so you have to be able to attract staff to come from hospitals into a care facility. So a lot of our insureds are having to increase the salaries that they're paying. The caring community is not a minimum wage job. It should not be. It never has been. And in order to attract talent, you have to have the right salaries. Care costs are going up, but we had seen previously that the actual employees were not seeing the benefit of those increased care costs. Now we are. I think the pandemic had a huge impact on the salaries of people who are carers. And we are definitely seeing that our insureds are having to pay a higher salary in order to get qualified care in. Treating carers as a proper vocational role rather than a minimum wage role has been huge in persuading people to join. There's a huge impact in trying to get young people to have the caring profession. The concerns obviously are that in 10 years' time, where's the next round of carers coming from? And the youth of today sometimes don't see caring as a profession. So we're trying to get into schools and show how caring as a profession can be actually really rewarding.
That's pretty upbeat and positive, and I must say something of a surprise given the sort of relentlessly negative media focus on that issue. I mean, did Brexit play a big part in?
Massively so. Yeah, massively so. Where we would normally have carers coming in from parts of Europe, that facility has been stopped, and now you have to have a visa in order to be able to work. So the pool of resource is limited, And so it's now, what do you have to do in order to attract that talent? And it's not quite as simple as it's all about salary. People want flexibility in their roles. And so we have seen some of our insureds are offering a fixed shift pattern of only days or only nights, or, as I say, splitting the day into different shifts so that it's not quite as rigid as an 8-hour or 12-hour shift.
And what sort of impact are those sorts of initiatives having on employers' liability claims, on the claims that you're seeing that are being brought by members of staff against their care home employers?
Unfortunately, stress claims are on the rise.
Yeah.
And it's really unsurprising given what the carers had to face for 3 years. The problem that I think a lot of the insureds are facing are the rules around what to do, the HR sort of rules around what to do with somebody who is advising you that they are stressed at work. It has to be taken seriously. It cannot just be brushed under the carpet. And unfortunately, when subjects such as that, when the carers don't feel they're being listened to and the employers are taking it seriously, they will bring a claim. And I think the 3 years that they have faced such trauma, the patience of the carers actually is reduced now. And so if employers are not taking their calls seriously for a reduction in their stress levels, then a claim will be pursued. And that is quite clear. There are claimants firms out there that are actively advertising, are you stressed at work? Has it become untenable? Things like that. They get a phone call saying, how are you feeling? And the claimant sisters will wangle a claim out of it. And so we really do recommend to all of our insureds that A, you have an HR facility, and B, if there are any employees who you see and hear and they are formally saying, I'm feeling pressure at work and I can't take anymore, you take that seriously and you go through the HR process.
What if you're a small care home? You may not have the sort of capability or the capacity to have a specialist HR team. How would you be advising people in that situation? What should they be doing to be looking out for these claims and trying to support their staff and prevent them?
It's all about actioning when someone has told you that they have an issue. If you ignore it, then we are going to have difficulty in defending it. Now, not all scenarios are going to be ones where you can actually do something about it. If there is an issue with lack of staff, for example, and so therefore the staff that you do have are under more pressure, that's not necessarily stress at work. That's a finite period of time that you have an increased workload. So we do have to balance the formal claims for stress versus it's a short-term period where I'm feeling a little bit more anxious at work. And I think if you have great communication with your staff and with your team and you talk through the issues, a lot of them can be resolved. But the main problem that we find is when issues are raised and not dealt with and potentially just, yes, I'll deal with that tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. So if you do not have a formal HR team, there's some great websites that can help you in stress claims. I know ACAS also have the ability to, they've got some great information on their website about managing stress claims. But from our perspective, it's keep communication opening and ensuring that your staff who have true and genuine concerns about their health and well-being at work, that you try to make reasonable accommodations for those issues.
And in terms of other types of employer liability cases, there always seem to be a large number of sort of personal injury type claims involving lifting and back injuries and so forth. Are those still a feature in the sector or less so now?
Less so now, because obviously technology with hoists, etc., has intervened, and the basic motto should be there should be no manual handling of any kind. That's the bottom line. However, you work up from there. So you can't have no manual handling in a care facility. So what is the least amount that we can do? And so therefore hoists and various other lifting equipment or two-man lift, those items coming in. And so we are seeing less and less of that kind of issue. Other issues have filled its place, though, unfortunately. So with one hand you give and the other you take away.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Thank you. And just moving on from there, we're obviously in something of a brave new world as far as the regulatory landscape is concerned with the introduction of the CQC's new single assessment framework. And we hear a lot at Altair anecdotally and from our clients about some of the challenges that managing and keeping up to speed with and complying with that new framework is causing. Do you have any insights from your work in the care and nursing home sector about that and about what people are finding when it comes to trying to sort of get up to speed with the new system?
Yeah, the anecdotal conversations that we're having with our clients is that it is starting to get quite overwhelming about getting paper documents through the digital portal. If you've got a huge bundle of paper documents, they have to be scanned on. Some instances, they have to be redacted, depending on what you're doing with that information. And so our clients are really struggling with the sheer volume of information now that has to be submitted, depending on what the issue is. And with that comes its own issue of data protection and whether that information should be disclosed to various parties. So from our clients' perspective, it's now getting to the point where some of our clients have had to hire people to literally just submit information through the portal. It's their day job to sit and redact care plans and medical records and various other documents. And that, I don't think, is what the intention was when they built the portal. No. And I think as technology moves on and care homes go to a more electronic-based facility, then I think the real pain that they're feeling at the moment will go away. But that's going to take time and investment. And those are key issues that none of us have at the moment. And so, in this particular sector.
Yes, thank you. And just whilst we're touching on the regulatory side of things, in terms of inquests and other types of disciplinary or non-claims hearings, what sort of issues are you seeing members of staff and managers facing when they are asked to give evidence, for example, at an inquest or before a regulatory tribunal?
Well, unlike you and I, most carers have never set foot in a court. They have never set foot in an inquest, coronial hearing. They have never been involved in anything like this. And it can be really intimidating. But more importantly, especially if there is an inquest and it's a fatality that's involved, there could be significant ramifications from that. Now, my personal view is on inquests that formal legal advice should be obtained, witness statements taken and submitted to the coroner in advance of the final hearing. And the reason why I say that is because some of our insureds are finding that they're doing this on their own without support. They submit witness statements that they're holding information within that isn't technically needed to be submitted. It's then stumbling upon other issues and it's snowball effect. My personal view is that if you have an insurance policy that will allow you to have legal representation and support for inquests, absolutely take up your insurer's offer on that, because it is key not only for the outcome. Nobody wants a prevention of future deaths order to be issued, but more importantly, your staff members have to go through this. And we were talking about stress at work earlier on. There's nothing more stressful than sat in front of a coroner when you're talking about a fatality and you hear the words bandied around, gross negligence, manslaughter, and you hear future prevention of death order. Those are not terms that a care worker will come across daily. But yet in our job, it is.
It goes to supporting the staff, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It goes right back to what I said earlier on, that having that support is crucial.
Yes, and of course, as we both well know, inquests, although they are strictly fact-finding inquiries into the circumstances of a death, can and often do act as a springboard for further claims or proceedings, civil or criminal?
Absolutely. And from our perspective, once the coroner has made their final determination, it's too late then for us to get involved. We deal with the civil claims, but the criminal side, once that determination has been made, that's it. So we would much rather get involved early doors, help you draft those witness statements, help you put that evidence in front of the coroner and support you through the process, and hopefully actually get the coroner to agree that your carer and your managers are not required to attend in the inquest because they have submitted their information beforehand and they're not needed. That is best case scenario. But we're not seeing on a regular basis that happening. We're seeing more and more cases where coroners are asking for members of staff to give witness evidence and they're unprepared and ill-informed as to the process. And that can always spell trouble, really, to be quite honest.
Yeah, thank you. And you touched in that answer on the support that insurers can play in that regard as well. What other features of insurance do you think are particularly beneficial to this particular sector?
For care homes, to be quite honest, having a combined insurance policy that covers property, employer's liability, public liability, medical negligence, it's so crucial to have everybody understanding your specific needs and your specific requirements as an insurer. If you have an insurer that deals with the EL claims only and another insurer dealing with the PL claims, you may never see eye to eye, and they certainly won't communicate with each other. Having one insurer, a one-stop shop effectively of being able to deal with all of your insurance needs, you will get that communication. You will get that ability to be able to call upon, because that wide portfolio is there. You're not going to need to ensure, have I got the right insurer and am I delayed in contacting them? You're going to have that ability to be able to pick up the phone, speak to somebody and get your needs dealt with. Having siloed effects sometimes can be quite detrimental, especially when we're talking about service users who unfortunately died. And depending on which policy is called upon, your employees for giving the evidence versus the public liability insurers for dealing with a potential civil claim for the neglect of the person who's died. You've got to have that combined defence of all of it. So yeah, that's our experience for sure.
Yeah, so being joined up, I mean, that makes perfect sense. So drawing it all together, I think it's been in some ways, quite a positive picture that we're seeing. Obviously, there's a lot of issues in the sector, but it's moved on now from where it was 4 years ago. And are we now seeing some green shoots of recovery?
I'm definitely positive. Yeah, definitely positive. I think bed numbers are up, for argument's sake. You know, there was a period of time where in our care home insureds weren't getting the income that they needed and they had a lot of empty beds. Now bed numbers are up. Staff retention is up, the use of agencies is down. All of that is crucial to running a great care home business. And so we are definitely seeing some positives. Now that we are seeing that, now is the time to look in now and see if we can help people reduce the number of claims that are coming in, look at risk analysis, look at the risk profile and try and reduce that picture, because the claims numbers are still quite high. And I think now is the perfect time to forget the past and try and help our insureds reduce their numbers.
Thank you, Lisa. Nice positive note to end on. And thank you very much for your time today and for appearing on the podcast.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Altair Talks. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe or leave a like or a review on whatever platform you're listening on, as this helps spread the word. If you have any questions or comments or topics you'd like us to explore in future episodes, please do contact us, as we'd love to hear from you. You can find us on LinkedIn or visit our website at www.altairinsurance.com. Stay tuned for more episodes, and until next time, take care of yourselves. The information contained in this podcast is not intended to represent a complete analysis of the topics presented and is provided for information purposes only for practitioners based in the UK. It is not intended as legal advice, and no responsibility can be accepted by Altair Insurance or by DWF Group for any reliance placed upon it. Independent legal advice should always be obtained before applying any information to particular circumstances.